Hey everyone, welcome to Strategy 8, Imaginary Play. Just a friendly reminder that you've gone through 7 previous strategy videos and you've trialed some of those other strategies during daily routines. And again, the goal of all of these strategies is language exposure, giving our child as many opportunities to hear a word so that they can learn it. And I also want to remind you that none of the strategies that we talked about are mutually exclusive, meaning they have to be used by themselves. The goal is for these strategies to build upon each other, right? And we've talked about how you could use communicative temptations or creating opportunities for your child to communicate and expansions, right? Or choices and expansions. And so you can see how all of these strategies pair together and really build upon each other. And when we talk about some of these strategies, so for example, imaginary play, it's probably something that you're already doing with your child or just beginning to do. So it's bringing awareness to how you can use these skills and strategies that you might not even knew you were using and add more strategies onto them, right? So the goal of imaginary play is to enhance your child's language skills, vocabulary, and understanding of the world through creative and unstructured pretend play. So what is imaginary play or pretend play? The science behind it, why should we use it, putting it into practice, and some common questions I get about it. So what is it? I like to describe imaginary play as a magical and boundless world where creativity, social skills, problem solving, and language development all converge. So in a world of pretend play, children can freely explore words and ideas, which makes the language learning process fun and engaging, right? Because through my experience with preschools and 3 to 5-year-olds, I do tons of imaginary play. And we're going to dive into detail about how I can use imaginary play and role playing to teach different concepts specifically related to social skills. And we're going to get into that in a second. So the science behind this strategy. A study by Lillard et al. And their team found that children who engage in pretend play tended to exhibit better language skills. These children have been observed to use more advanced sentence structures, larger vocabularies, and demonstrate a better understanding of the rules of language compared to peers who did not engage in pretend play. So this is highly related to what we've already talked about in so many presentations, which is the more language a child hears, the more opportunity they have to learn those words, right? And the perfect example is our child is likely not going to learn words that they don't hear, which means that they're not going to independently by themselves use those words. So we need to think about how we can use words and phrases that are relevant to our child and our family in our daily routines as often as possible in a natural way so that we can help them learn and communicate as effectively as possible. So why use imaginary play? We just covered that. Language exposure. It's huge. So I'm encouraging my child to use more diverse and complex vocabulary. Social skills development. And I'm going to provide some examples of this on the next slide for putting it into practice. But with the children there's lots of children I work with in preschools who have social emotional goals, meaning they have goals targeting their language skills with peers and adults in the classroom. And so I can use imaginary play or role playing to create different situations, and we can navigate how we can solve the problems in the situations I create. And I'll give an example here in a second. That ties into the creative problem solving. I'm engaging children in scenarios where they're going to have to use their innovative thinking, and I can build upon what they come up with or provide an example of what they could come up with during imaginary play. So putting it into practice, I'm creating scenarios, and I'm letting my child also create scenarios that I can take part in their pretend world. So really it's kind of a collaboration. I'm role playing, and this is the part I want to expand upon. So for example, with imaginary play, I was in a preschool the other day, and I'm working with a child who has social emotional goals for expected behaviors. So when a peer does something the child doesn't like, how is the child responding? Are they pushing the kid, or are they using their words and using strategies and modeling and negotiating or protesting to stop the situation from escalating? And so the way I can teach these concepts of appropriate behavior and language to respond to these situations is through imaginary play. So what I did was we had a bunch of, the classroom has a bunch of play people, and I was a play person and he was two play people. And what I did was, in our pretend world, I was largely following his lead, but I would introduce ideas like, oh, let's go get some hot cocoa. And I would intentionally create problems in the process and then provide the child choices of how we could respond. So for example, in our pretend world, my child spilled his hot cocoa. And I said, I feel mad. I'm modeling that appropriate language for big behaviors. Do you see my eyebrows? They're down. And I feel like yelling. And then I provided a choice. Should I use my words and take a break, or should I hit my friend? And 9 out of 10 times, he, based on the choice, would provide the appropriate response. Use your words and take a break, right? So I'm encouraging the development of those skills in a fun and natural way. And then I can transition those skills with actual peers. Oh, remember when we got hot cocoa and my boy was mad? Oh, he used his words. I like it when you use your words too. So I'm using these imaginary scenarios to expose him to, you can expose your child to new words, new ideas, new concepts, and it's a great learning and teaching opportunity. And then I put narrative expansion, so I'm helping expand the story and I'm introducing new elements and vocabulary. This is greatly related to our expansion strategy, because if a child says something during our imaginary play, I can add 1 or 2 words onto it, introduce a new idea, and make it slightly more complex and see where they go with it. An example of imaginary play could be as simple as during mealtime, I'm transforming a simple meal preparation. Maybe my child is helping me prepare dinner, to a pretend cooking show, right? Where my child is explaining the recipe and we're talking about it and they're helping me with different activities for preparing dinner. It's just simple daily activities. It doesn't have to be anything big or fancy, and it can be, but it can be really just those redundant daily routines. So pro tips, I like to pair it with let your child lead, because we're engaging in pretend play that my child is interested in. And expansions, like I talked about, building upon what they say by adding 1 or 2 words onto it. I really like using imaginary play with book reading. And what I mean is try it with bringing books to life, meaning do what they do, do what the characters in the book do. That's the imaginary play. So for example, if I'm reading a book and it's a winter storm and the boy in the book or girl in the book is making hot cocoa, me and my child can make hot cocoa too. So I'm using the imaginary play as a way to connect stories to real life, right? And pair those actions and objects and items with real life items and objects and actions, and help them pair that word. Another pro tip I have is use visuals and costumes. So it's always you're just supporting language development and your child's understanding for new words and vocabulary by pairing an actual item, right? So if I have an apple, I'm holding an apple. If I have hot cocoa, you can smell the hot cocoa, you can see the hot cocoa when I say the word hot cocoa, right? It's going to help the child learn it faster. And then costumes. So generally when we think of imaginary play, we think of like astronauts, right? Or like fantasy worlds. So you can use costumes to just ramp up the imaginary play. So some common questions I get is, how can I encourage imaginary play? Provide simple props or use everyday items as tools for imagination. What if my child is not naturally inclined towards pretend play? Completely okay. I would gently introduce elements for pretend play and follow their lead. And then also as adults, so for example, me and my partner can model pretend play or imaginary play in a daily routine in front of our child and see how they respond, right? Especially if it's something that we haven't done before, it's likely going to get a funny reaction from your child, because they're going to be like, what are my parents doing, right? So that's another idea. Is there such thing as too much pretend play? Balance is key. So encourage a variety of activities, including pretend play. So just find a balance. Figure out how your child is responding. Is your child engaging it, or are you mostly engaging it? And if they're having fun, right? Language learning is going to be the most effective when a child is having fun. They're enjoying the activity, they're engaged in the activity. So create a fun and low stress environment. So celebrating imagination and language, like I said, creating a fun and rich environment, and you're exploring language creativity. So some closing thoughts. I would recommend printing off the imaginary play strategy page, putting it somewhere familiar, and choosing a daily activity where I give you over 40 daily activities with specific examples of how you could use pretend play during those activities. Give it a try, and once you feel comfortable, expand across more activities and build upon it with other strategies that we've previously talked about. Pretend play is immersive and it's a dynamic environment, lots and lots of language. If you have any other questions about imaginary play or pretend play, please reach out to me, and I'm excited to see you in the next one. I'm really proud of you all for continuing to be so proactive and learning these strategies and giving them a try. Again, I feel confident in your skills and your ability to use these strategies. I'm here to support you. So I'll see you in the next presentation.